Today, the philosophy of property auctions. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to this post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Well, according to the mainstream media, property auctions are booming, despite the fact that actually the counts are not necessarily that much higher than last year. But it's worth just thinking about the auction process. And there was a very interesting article published in The Conversation from Murray Bennett, who's a PhD candidate from the University of Newcastle. And the argument went like this: despite the pandemic, Australia is in the midst of a hugely competitive auction market. Sydney, in particular, is experiencing dizzy auction clearance rates. And the Reserve Bank's decision this week to keep interest rates extraordinarily low will no doubt keep auctioneers busy. And if you've ever taken part in an auction, you'll know emotions can run high and sometimes drive us to bid more than originally intended. And he published a paper in the Journal of Cognitive Research, Principles and Implications. And they found the way auctions are designed and run can vastly increase competitive arousal in bidders. That's obviously valuable information for sellers, but if you're a buyer, the good news is there's a lot you can do to ensure your competitive spirit doesn't leave you with a bad case of buyer's remorse. So they studied people's behaviour in one of the most competitive bidding environments possible, a Dutch auction. Dutch auctions are a special auction format where the price starts unrealistically high and then comes down in increments, and the first person to bid wins. Originating in the Netherlands for the rapid sale of perishable goods such as flowers, these auctions are fast, exciting, and ultra-competitive. Bidders put everything on the line with the timing of a single bid. Bidders must trade off between certainty and price. Bid early to secure the item and you pay top dollar. Bid later at a lower price and you risk losing to another bidder. Dutch auctions run this way are not common in the Australian property market, but by studying how people behave in them, we can learn a bit about how competitive spirits influence decision-making in other settings. A strong sense of competitive spirit may be a human trait honed by years of evolution, but in a heightened competitive environment, you may become more willing to take risks you would otherwise not. You might find your focus drifting towards a different and possibly dangerous form of motivation, the desire to win at all costs. Their recent study looked at people's bidding behaviours during a series of simulated Dutch auctions where they asked participants to imagine being managers of a warehouse. They were asked to bid against their competitors to buy goods and fill up their warehouse while staying within their allocated budget. By bidding early, they stood a better chance of filling up their warehouse quickly but risked paying too much for the goods and running out of money before the warehouse was full. Wait too long and they risk losing the chance to buy stock at all and watching it go into their competitors' rapidly filling warehouses. In this tense environment, they found people were willing to sacrifice a better long-term financial outcome for the sake of simply beating their competitors. In other words, they often burned through their budget too quickly just to win. People initially made well-placed and reasonably priced bids early in the auction series, but as the auction continued, they watched participants place bids that were unnecessarily and perhaps irrationally draining their budget for the sake of a short-term victory. And they said the study helps to shed light on bidder behaviour in lots of markets, whether it's property, eBay, auction houses, or any setting where the competitive spirit can take hold. If you're attending an auction and don't want to be a winner who loses in the long term, there are 3 ways to avoid falling victim to your own competitive spirit. First, they said be aware of your decisions when in competition mode, because that can push you past your budget. Separating the emotion from the decision can help minimize your risk of overspending. Secondly, set your spending limit before you start and know when to stop. Their findings suggest that competition can easily drag us past that point. While winning is nice, it can also be a curse. And thirdly, give a friend your budget and have them bid for you. Beware their sporting nature, though. They might be also tempted by the thrill of the victory. And my point is this: when you go into an auction, you can get swept up and swept away. And given the fact that many auctioneers are very flexible on the price and price guidelines, and we've already been highlighting the fact that underquoting is rife across Australia, you need to be very careful, particularly now. I think that you need to go in with a very clear top price and stick to it. And that means doing your homework beforehand, so you go in fully prepared, but are also aware of these animal spirits that auctioneers rely on and can easily drive you to make bad decisions. And talking of bad decisions, there was another article in the conversation from a senior lecturer in marketing at the University of Technology in Sydney. It went like this: you make decisions all the time. Most are small, however, some are really big. They have ramifications for years or even decades. In your final moments, you might well think back to those decisions, and some you may regret. Part of what makes big decisions so significant is how rare they are. You don't get an opportunity to learn from your mistakes. If you want to make big decisions you won't regret, it's important you learn from others who've been there before. Now, there's a good deal of existing research into what people regret in their lives. In a particular project they're looking at, they decided to approach the problem from the other end and ask people about their life's biggest decisions. They'd spent most of their career studying what you might call small decisions: what product to buy, what portfolio to invest in, and who to hire. But none of the research was very helpful when it came to large, big, life-changing decisions. So to better understand what life's biggest decisions are, the researcher recruited 657 Americans aged between 20 and 80 years to tell them about the 10 biggest decisions in their lives so far. Each decision was classified into one of 9 categories and 58 subcategories. At the end of the survey, respondents ranked the 10 decisions from biggest to smallest. And here's a chart which shows each of the 58 decision subcategories in terms of how often it was mentioned along the horizontal axis, and how big the decision was considered in retrospect along the vertical axis. In the upper right of the chart, therefore, we're going to see decisions that are both very significant and very common. Getting married and having a child stand out clearly there. Other fairly common big life decisions, including starting a new job and pursuing a degree, less common, but among the highest ranked life decisions, included end of a life, such as that of an unborn child or a dying parent, and engaging in self-harm. Of course, the results depend on who you ask. Men in their 70s have different answers to women in their 30s. So to explore that data more deeply, they built a tool to filter the results down to specific types of respondents. Much can also be learnt about how to make good life decisions by asking people what their biggest regrets are. Regret is a negative emotion you feel when reflecting on past decisions and wishing you'd done something differently. In 2012, American caregiver Bronnie Ware wrote a book about her experiences in palliative care. There were 5 regrets that dying people told her about most often. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. I wish I'd let myself be happier. This anecdotal evidence received support from more rigorous academic research. It was on a 2011 study asked a nationally representative sample of 270 Americans to describe one significant life regret. The 6 most common reported regrets involved romance at 19.3%, family at 16.9%, education at 14%, career at 13.8%, finance at 9.9%, and parenting at 9%. Although lost loves and unfulfilling relationships were the most common regrets, there was an interesting gender difference. For women, regrets about love, romance and family were more common than regrets about work, career and education, while the reverse was true for men. Several factors increase the chance you will feel regret. In the long run, it's inaction, deciding not to pursue something that generates more regret. This is particularly true for males, especially when it comes to romantic relationships. If only I'd asked her out, we might now be happily married. Poor decisions produce greater regret when it's harder to justify those decisions in retrospect. I really value my friends and family, so why did I leave them all behind to take up that overseas job, for example? Given that we're social beings, poor decisions in domains relevant to our sense of social belonging, such as a romantic and family context, are often most regretted. Why did I break up my family by having a fling? Regrets tend to be strongest for lost opportunities, that is, when undesirable outcomes that could have been prevented in the past can no longer be affected. I could have had a better relationship with my daughter if I'd been there more often when she was growing up, for example. And the most enduring regrets in life result from decisions that move you further from the ideal person that you want to be. I wanted to be a role model, but I couldn't put the wine bottle down. These findings provide valuable lessons for those with big life decisions ahead, which is actually nearly everyone. You're likely to have to keep making big decisions over the whole course of your life. The most important decisions in life relate to family and friends. Spend the time getting those decisions right, and then don't let other distractions, particularly those at work, undermine those relationships. Seize opportunities. You can apologise or change course later, but you can't time travel. Your education and experience can never be lost. And avoid making decisions that violate your personal values and move you away from your aspirational self. If you have good justification for a decision now, no matter what happens, you'll at least not regret it later. Now let's swing that back then to think about property. It is fascinating to me as I go through my one-on-one conversations with people that many people aspire to property which is probably more expensive than they can really afford. And yet they spend a lot of time pursuing that dream, that aspiration, hoping that somehow magically they're going to find the perfect bargain. Looking at all the data from my surveys and from my conversations with people, those who actually drop their expectations a little and go for something a little less far-reaching, often a little less expensive, and therefore easier to maintain and manage financially speaking, seem to be happier later. And going right back to that auction story, if in fact you fly into an auction and join those animal spirits and pay over the odds, you could well end up not just regretting it short term, but regretting it long term. Because those big financial commitments that you make and that property that you buy isn't just for today or just for tomorrow, but it's for the next few years, and the decision that you take can fundamentally shape your finances for a generation. So as I always say, caveat emptor, buyer beware. Make sure that you really think through the decisions you're going to take. And again, understand how, particularly in the auction context, you can get driven sometimes to make quite bad decisions, which you may well regret at leisure. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.